Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning. See you again. Today we will continue our discussion. As I remind in the previous video, okay, before we discuss about the topics today, you should read my lecture note first, okay, regarding the different type of mixing method, advantages and disadvantages of these mixing methods, and also the importance of SG and Brogniart equation in ceramics processing. Okay, for today we will discuss about the three important points at the second topic for mixing process. Okay, so now I'll show you the slide that has been prepared by the previous group, your seniors. Okay, I think this slide is the best way to explain in short, okay, the difference between the type of mixing methods and also advantages and also disadvantages of this mixing method. Okay, for the first discussion point, we want to discuss about the difference between wet, dry and dry wet mixing method. I think if you go through in the Googles or references, either journals or website, so you can see there are many explanation about the difference between wet, dry and dry wet mixing method. For your information, for this topic, there is a popular questions in the final exam. Okay, normally we can combine this topic with the previous topic here. As I mentioned in the previous video, we can combine the mixing method with mechanism. We can also combine the definition of importance of mixing method and also the difference between wet, dry and dry wet mixing method. So for the differences of this mixing method, so you can see the table up here. Okay, this group already summarize the differences between these mixing methods. Okay, in the case of wet, as you can, I think the wet mixing method you already know. Okay, normally for wet mixing method, we need to form a slurry. Slurry means that the combination between the liquid of the medium and also the ceramic powders. And for the wet mixing method, normally you need to do the casting slip, and also you need to consume high energy consumption. However, for dry mixing method, it's easy to remember. For dry mixing method, is without the liquid, so means that you just mix the ceramic powder itself. For example, if you add ceramic powder A and ceramic powder B, and then you blend together in the tumbler or the container, and then you need to mix it using the mixers. And then for wet and dry mixing method, normally it's a combination between the mixture of the powder and also the slurry. Okay, in this technique, normally you can do like this. First, you need to perform the dry mixing method first, and then once you perform it, so you need to transfer it into another production process. You need to add the liquid media in order to produce wet mixing process. Okay, it's easy because for wet dry and wet dry, in terms of the high energy consumption and also the facilities, the equipments, normally the wet and dry need much higher cost and also instruments or machine when compared with wet and dry mixing method. Okay, so now we talk about the advantages of this mixing method. Okay, for wet mixing method, you can see here, we need to control the level of the water levels precisely. And then for wet mixing method, spraying operation is easy because you need to prepare in slurry. For dry mixing method, for the advantages, actually for dry mixing method, the advantage is that you need to have a cheap labor cost, and also the production cost also very low, because you no need to use the water, and also you need to extra storage area in order to perform this kind of mixing process. For wet and dry mixing process, of course, more complex the process, more quality product you get. Okay, and then for wet and dry mixing process, the advantages is that you can get more homogeneous, more quality product, but as a return, you need to invest more money to get that kind of processes. Example, for wet and dry mixing process, sometimes for wet, even though wet and dry mixing process is very expensive, but some of the industry use this kind of mixing process, especially when involved in the advanced ceramics processing. Okay, now we talk about disadvantages of this mixing method. For wet mixing method, you can imagine when you deal with the slurry, of course, the production process become mess. Okay, mess that's dirty. The slip is easy to drop on the floor, and then you need to produce, a lot of wastage materials. And also the important is that when you perform this wet mixing method, okay, the most probability worst case scenario happen is that the sedimentation process will be occurred. Sedimentation means you can see after a while you mix using the wet mixing method, you can see the separation between the liquid and also the ceramic powder. In the dry mixing method, I think the utmost problem is that they will produce the dust. Okay, and you can see there the high dust emission is high. Okay, and then for dry mixing method, you need to control actually precisely the level of moisture content in the ceramic powder, because if you didn't control it, you have a very severe issues when you do the firing process during fabrication of the ceramic products. Okay, in the case of wet and dry mixing method, of course, as I mentioned before, the disadvantages is that high cost, longer duration, and also definitely you need much spaces and also equipment in order to perform this kind of ceramics processing product. Okay, now we already talked about the difference and also the advantages and disadvantages for above mixing methods. Okay, I want to remind you, okay, because in ceramic processing, those type of mixing methods is really important. So my advice to you, please, you need to jot down somewhere, and please take note that this is a serious point you should take care of, okay, in order to understand the whole process of the ceramics processing. Okay, now we want to talk about the importance of SG and Brogniart equation in ceramics processing. For detailed explanation of these processes, you can refer my lecture notes. Okay, actually there have a difference between SG and Brogniart equation in ceramic processing, where we should apply the SG equation and when we can apply the Brogniart equation. Okay, in this slide, this group summarize that for SG equation, okay, normally you can see, maybe you can see my pointer here. For SG equation, normally we want to determine how much mixture of powder in the slurry. Okay, and for Brogniart equation, you need you can identify or estimate the amount of dry material in a given volume slip. Actually not slope, actually is a slip. Okay, so in these cases, I give you simple example how to calculate using SG and also Brogniart equation. Okay, for this kind of equation, I think in the past year exam, I think for the past, I think last 3 years, okay, 3 years ago, I think this question had been asked in the final exam. So therefore, my tips to you, try to find few simple calculation related to SG equation and also the Brogniart equation. Why I ask you to do this sometime again, I repeat in the previous slide, we can combine this equation with other kind of equations, and normally the question asked in the final exam is not so difficult in comparison with other calculation in ceramics processing, because SG equation and Brogniart equation is commonly used in industries. Therefore, you as an engineer, so you must understand how to calculate using when you want to use SG and when you want to use the Brogniart equation. Okay, so the details you can refer to my notes, or you can go through Google, find out SG equation for ceramics processing. They will give you thousands of examples. Okay, please try this calculation, and hopefully you understand well when and where we should apply those equations. Okay, so that's all for this section. So please wait my next video about other topics. Thank you.